What's up YouTube? This is John Helm with Helm Wood Shop and Smithy, back with another video. This is the 5th installment of the DJ cabinet build. Thanks for joining me. So I got these all laid out, got the garage all set up and ready to spray polyurethane, and then I realized that there are a couple pieces that I still haven't cut. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut those real quick, and then we'll get working on the finish. So those big pieces of plywood I just cut are going to be the backs of the cabinets, and the long strip of oak that I ripped down on the table saw is going to be the kick plate for the one with the large desktop on it. Those still have some routing work and some sanding that needs to be done, but while I have the table saw out, I'm going to go ahead and cut a bunch of little strips of 3/4 inch plywood, because I came up with an idea for how I could stack these without messing up the paint while they dry, which will make it a lot easier for me to get everything in one pass in the small space that I have available to me. So let's go ahead and do that, and then I will pull out the jigsaw and the router and we'll get to work on these back pieces. Alright, now I need to cut a hole out in the back here so that all the cables can pass through and get to the outlet behind it. So I'm just going to mark that out, cut it out with a jigsaw, and then I'm going to set up a jig and route off all the edges so everything is square and smooth and straight. Now I'm just going to round over the edges. Alright, next I need to route the kick plate. You can see here on the relief where it's going to be attaching that since I routed this out with a 1/2 inch router bit, I don't have a sharp corner to join up to. So I'm just going to take a 1/2 inch round over bit and round over that edge of the kick plate, and it should sit in there nice and flush. So it took a few passes to really dial in the depth of that route, but as you can see it fits in nice and snug. So now I'm just going to bevel off the corners on the outside of this so that they match the face frame. I'll do that with a 45-degree router bit, and then we can start sanding and staining. Well, I obviously spent a lot of time getting all the dust out of the shop before I started spraying poly, and now I'm creating a lot more dust. And I'm worried about creating even more dust when I start sanding everything, so I used a little redneck ingenuity and stuck a shop vac on here. Hopefully that handles the majority of it. I'm still gonna have to do some vacuuming and blowing stuff off with the air compressor and whatnot before I spray, but this will keep it to a minimum. Also, I obviously need to sand down these pieces that I just cut because they need to get stain on them, but also these side pieces, they have a couple dings and dangs from me having to move them around the shop a lot. And also, some of them didn't take the stain as well as I would like them to, so they don't match the other pieces. So I'm gonna real lightly sand these and put another coat of stain on them as well. Sanded, time to do a quick tidying and then I can put some stain on. It took way longer than I thought it would. I told my wife, yeah, I'll be outside for a couple hours and then I'll be back in and hang out with you all the rest of the day. And now I can see the sun starting to go down. Man, that sucked. Also, there was a hole in my glove apparently, so that's gonna be fun to scrub off. Anyway, I'll be back tomorrow after these have had some time to dry, and then we'll spray on our first coat of poly. Can't wait. It is a couple days later, and it is time to start sealing these pieces now. Unfortunately, I got a couple hang-ups. The first one is that I let a buddy of mine borrow my spray gun, and I went over his house to get it, but then there were beers involved, and I left without it, so it's still over at his house, so I don't have it right now, but I can get it later. The second is that it's raining, so it's kind of warm and humid right now, which is not really the best environment for spraying or brushing on any type of sealant. It just takes too long to dry and cure, and that kind of sucks. But I'm using a water-based polyurethane, so it should still dry well. It's just gonna take a little bit longer to do so. Now, it's not a big deal that I don't have the sprayer right now because it really is only important for the last layer of sealant to be sprayed on. It's fine to roll or brush on the first two layers because you're gonna sand them smooth, so there's no need to do a million really light coats with a sprayer like you would if you're going for an automotive quality finish, especially because these pieces aren't heavily puttied, so you can see the wood grain through it. So you're never gonna get that glass type finish unless you do a really, really heavy build and a lot of sanding. I have no intention of doing that. This is gonna be a semi-gloss finish. So I'm gonna brush on the first 3 layers of sealant. That should give me a nice build. I'll sand pretty well in between coats to try to get rid of any brush marks, ripples, ridges that I might have from applying it by hand. And then I will spray on the last coat, a nice wet coat with an HVOP gun, and that should give me a nice, clean, smooth finish, and you shouldn't be able to see any dust nibs or anything in it, provided that the last coat is sprayed on very well and in a very clean environment. So, with all that said, let's get out a brush and I'll show you how to do this. So you can get an idea how long these time lapses are. I'm going to do one for you in real time. Real light sanding with 220. You gotta be very careful when you're sanding. It's really easy to go a little bit too deep and remove some of the stain. I don't want to do that. And it happened in a couple spots. Sweet. Get a nice even coat of stain, and then teep out all the marks. This is really similar to an old school technique called rolling and teeping, where you basically just apply your stain on, not your stain, your sealant. You apply your sealant with a roller, and then you smooth it out with a dry brush. That's essentially what I'm doing. I'm just using one brush to do it. Get it on nice and even, and just smooth it down. Don't use a lot of pressure when you're doing it this way, just the tips of the bristles. push into it at all. Sometimes one real light pass like that won't get rid of all the other brush strokes because you're not applying very much pressure. So you have to go over it twice. Not a biggie. Nice smooth even coat. All right, that is one coat done. So I don't know if you noticed, but I only did one side of these and both sides need to get sealed. So if I'm gonna put 3 coats on each one of these, I'm gonna have to go through that entire process 6 times. And it takes about an hour, hour and a half each time. So you do the math. It's a lot of work. Even though this is a really crappy, tedious, long process that everybody hates doing, it's pretty important to do a good job on your finish. You can have a beautifully built piece of furniture and completely destroy it by doing a crappy job applying your sealant or your stain. Keep in mind how nice the finish needs to be on a specific component of whatever it is that you're building. Some places they need to be sealed, but it doesn't need to be 100% perfect and beautiful. The underside of a shelf, backside of the face frame, you know, those all do need to be sealed, but nobody ever sees them. So you don't spend a ton of time making it perfect. At the same time, there are other pieces that need to be 100% as good as you can possibly make them. On this project, that is the work surfaces and the face frames. If you notice in the time lapse that I did earlier, I didn't do anything on those with a brush. A brush is never gonna touch those. It's only gonna be spray on because it's just so easy to get drip marks or it's really difficult to maintain a wet edge the whole time, so you'll get little ridges on the edge of your last brush stroke because you're constantly trying to get into little corners and whatnot. And then of course the tabletops, I want those to look like glass because that's the main thing that everyone is going to be looking at while they're using the piece. So I'm going to spend a little bit extra time and attention to those more important components. And these I'll get a build with a brush and put a spray coat on for the 4th coat and they'll look great. So I'm gonna go inside now and let all this dry, then I'll come back out and do this whole thing over again. I have 3 coats of high gloss poly with a brush. It took forever. I finally got everything sanded and we are ready to spray. Finally, let's do it.
Using the sprayer the whole time.
Alright, I finally got all those pieces sprayed. They're all set aside drying, and now I can start working on my face frames and the worktops for these pieces. Finally done staining and sealing. It feels great. There are a couple tiny little blemishes here and there with the finish that I put on. Luckily, none of them are anywhere that matters. The parts that really matter, which are the face frames and the work surfaces, they look flawless, man. They came out crystal clear, super slick and smooth. They look gorgeous. So it is finally time for me to start assembling these. I don't have a lot of time right now because it is New Year's Eve and I just got home from work. Got cleaned up because we're gonna go over to a buddy of mine's house who's having people over for the New Year. And while I'm waiting for my wife to get home so we can leave, I'm just gonna start throwing these things together real fast. Probably have to finish them up in the morning. I'm not gonna go through all the details of putting them together because it's just a bunch of pocket holes. They just need to get stuck together. And this project, as well as this video, is getting really, really long and drawn out, and I need to just knock it out. So I really glazed over all the details on how to spray on a finish, and that's okay. This is more like a vlog than an instructional video, and I'll do an instructional video on how to put on a nice finish with a spray gun in the future. I have a really poverty spray setup. I have a little six gallon pancake Porter cable air compressor. It's not adequate for an HVLP gun, but I have come up with a method that makes it work almost as well. You do get a lot more overspray than you would with a high volume air compressor, but it still lays it on. It looks great. It comes out perfect every time. So we'll do that in a future video, but now it's time to start sticking these things together. Okay, so this is all that I got done before my wife came home from work, and she is like ready to go. So I'm gonna go now. The lift is gonna be here in 4 minutes. Not driving because it's New Year's Eve and I'm gonna be drunk. And then in the morning I'll come back with a terrible hangover and finish putting this together. Happy New Year, everybody. Yesterday we went out and I was at home and in bed by 9 o'clock. So I was able to get up early, and now it's time to get some work done. Well, that really did not go as planned, but I got it all together. I thought everything was just gonna snap right into place, and that was not the case. I had a bunch of finagling that I had to do to get everything how it's supposed to fit up nice and straight. But I made it happen. Time to do the next one. Hopefully it goes better. All right, finally got the second piece assembled completely. And this one went together way, way, way better than the other one did. Everything fits almost perfectly. There are just a couple little finishing touch-up places that I need to work on right now. But now it's time to try to turn this thing straight up so that I can get somebody to help me lift it down and set it on the floor. And that is gonna be no easy task because this son of a bitch is heavy. So let me see if I can do it without snapping my back. All right. Set it down without letting it slam too hard. Whew. I did it. All right. Dude, that was heavy. Here is the storage cabinet. I had to bring it inside my house to make more room in the garage. And as you can see, I don't have the greatest lighting in here, but it came out pretty well. It does need to get cleaned off. And there are a couple areas that didn't fit together as well as I wanted them to. So I'm gonna have to do a little bit of disassembly, make a couple adjustments, and then assemble it back together, but it's not gonna be a huge deal. So I'm not gonna bother including that in this video. I'll do that off camera. Let's go take a look at the other one. It went together much better. And here is the big one. It looks gorgeous. Everything fit together just how it was supposed to. I'm really happy with this one. And it's really hard for me to get good shots of it because it's up on top of the bench and I cannot get it down by myself. And I don't want to sound braggish, but if I can't pick it up, it is really, really heavy. I am a very strong individual, and this thing is just too unruly for me. It's so big, it's very difficult to get a good grip on it. It probably weighs, I don't know, probably 300 pounds. But it's so large and cumbersome that there's no way I could do it by myself, at least without putting way too much risk on the piece. I don't want to damage it. So let me get up on a ladder, I'll show you the top. I am very happy with how the top of this came out. The joins are completely seamless, you can't see them at all. The finish is gorgeous. There are no dust buds in it, or dust buds. There are no pieces of dust stuck in it. There are no bubbles. Everything looks great. The holes for the cables look especially nice. I was able to get those really smoothed out and dial in the finish even on the inside of those curves. So I'm really happy with how this turned out. There are a couple things I need to adjust here on the shelf, simply because the cabinet below it is so heavy, you can't really put any pressure on these while you're moving it or it'll snap that shelf right off. The shelf is very sturdy as it is, but it's not made to pick up a really heavy piece of furniture by. It's made to set your computer and your speakers on. So I'm going to take that off, put a few extra pocket holes in it, and just give it some extra support with 3 or 4 more screws on the top and 3 or 4 more on the bottom. But other than that, this thing is beautiful and I am very happy. And most of all, I'm just very happy to be done with it. All right, so in every project, my number one priority is not to make a really nice piece. It is to learn as much as I possibly can while I'm making the piece. Making a quality piece comes in number 2. And the reason that is because rather than just focusing on this one thing now, I'm also focused on the future. If I can learn as much as possible every time I make something, then the next time I make something, it's going to be that much nicer and that much easier and therefore that much quicker. And time is money. So on this build, I learned a lot, and subsequently my time wasn't worth very much money. So what did I learn? A, don't make a face frame and then build a cabinet off of it. I've never used that method, but I've heard a lot of people say that it's the best way to do things, and I don't think it is, at least not for me. And that lesson leads me to another lesson, which is really the overarching theme of this, which is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I had a lot of ideas about, hey, this is gonna make it better, this is gonna make it faster, this is gonna make this easier, and all of them made it longer, slower, and more difficult. And so all of them backfired on me in this build. The main one was building a face frame first and then building a cabinet off of it. The second one being staining and sealing your pieces before you assemble them. That turned out to be a terrible idea. It was practically impossible to get this thing assembled and everything put together the way I wanted it without damaging the finish. So there are a lot of little spots that I have to go and touch up with some stain and then sand around it and reseal it. I know it's kind of annoying to have to do it while it's assembled, but at least it's not going to get screwed up in the process. Doing it with a sprayer isn't always realistic after it's already assembled, because it can be hard to get the sprayer into all the angles. Just because the thing is big and cumbersome, it's a lot easier to do it with a paintbrush. But even doing it with a paintbrush would have been much easier and faster than doing it the way that I did. So I will not be doing it that way ever again. So in the future, I'm gonna do things the way that I always have in the past, which is build a box, spray it. Build a face frame, spray it. Stick them together, go have a beer. This way, it turned out a really good product, but man, it just took so long and so much effort to get there. Another lesson that I learned is that there's a point of diminishing returns when it comes to overbuilding. I always overbuild things, and the reason I do that is because I don't want people calling me saying that whatever I made them broke. It's just a huge hassle, it's a huge hindrance, and it means that whatever you gave them didn't fit the intended purpose. Now, sometimes that intended purpose is a little bit ridiculous, like letting your children crawl all over it. But if I can make something that is able to withstand that, then a person who treats it well is gonna have this piece of furniture for the rest of their life and pass it on to their children. But in this build, I went a little bit too far with the overbuilding. This thing is stupidly heavy. You could run into it with a car and it would probably mess the car up just as bad as it did the cabinet. I mean, it is a chunk. And that does make it really, really durable, and subsequently it will probably last a really, really long time. It'll probably need to be refinished long before we ever have structural issues with it, which is a good thing. But it also means that it's just a big, chunky looking piece. A lot of people want things that are a little bit more elegant looking, and it's difficult to do that when you overbuild it as much as I did this time. With all that said, after just a few little touch-ups here and there, these are gonna be some beautiful pieces. They're gonna be very tough. It is definitely not gonna wobble while he's up there mixing records, and it's definitely gonna hold all those records without all of the shelves sagging and everything like you would have on a thinner piece. So that is all good. I'm happy with the project, and I hope that my client is as well. If you've been following my videos, you see that now I have an intro sequence and an outro sequence, and I have a cool little icon and emblem and stuff for Helm WS, and part of the payment for these pieces was he designed those for me. So thank you very much to John for that. They look great. I hope everybody enjoys it, and I hope it makes the channel look a lot more professional. So until next time, thank you all very much for joining me. I'm sorry I came out with such a long video and that it took me so long to put it together, but this project just really turned into a beast, and I had to put my nose down and soldier through it. Anyway, now I can move on to bigger and better things. Bigger and better things that I've already started, such as making a batch of knives, such as making a Confederate D-Guard Bowie knife. But those had to sit on the back burner while my grinder was busted, and also because this piece is for a client and he wanted to get it in his house pretty quickly, so I had to focus specifically on that. So be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can get a notification when I have that next Confederate D-Guard Bowie knife up. I am really excited about that, and I'm hoping to finish it in the next video. Till then, y'all have a good one. Thanks for watching.